Good evening, Mayor and Council members. We just wanted to briefly highlight a couple of the changes since we had the last public meeting in response to questions that you asked. And this is, you received a copy of the updated River District redevelopment plan earlier this week, and these changes are all reflected in that document. We just thought we'd highlight them because there's a lot of material in there. As you know, the proposal for the redevelopment area known as the River District has three separate TAD boundaries, three separate TAD areas included in there. The TAD District number 2 is 6th Avenue Liberty District, which is shown in blue on the map. TAD number 3 is Uptown, which is shown in sort of an orange color. And TAD number 4 would be 2nd Avenue and City Village. And that has not changed, that basic boundary, but some of the boundaries have changed slightly, and I'll go over those. The Liberty District boundary is identical to what we had discussed at the last meeting. It's around 296 acres. The area is shown in blue here on the map, and that area has not changed. But in the Uptown area, there was a change that was made to exclude a property that we had previously included. Let me go to that map. If you look at the Uptown District, a parcel 004-009-004, which is basically between 13th and 14th Street, has now been excluded. Half of that parcel has been excluded from the TAD District. So if you look on the map, the upper map shows what it was originally, and then today we've got it taken out. That area is part of the River Landing project. It is intended at this point to be, I believe, a parking deck. That property now would continue on the City's Digest, and the advantage of doing that is you will receive the immediate revenues both from the construction and from the valuation of that parcel, in part to offset your concern about the reassessment impacts. So that project moves ahead. That part of that project will actually stay on the tax rolls, will not be included in the TAD. That's the only change in the Uptown boundary. And then on TAD District number 4, which is the City Village, as we had discussed at the last meeting, there was a request to include a couple parcels north of Manchester Expressway, which you can see it's sort of that curved-shaped, half-moon-shaped parcels. The previous boundary ended at Manchester Expressway, and now we've added, I think it's 2 parcels to the north are in there. So that's the only other change to the boundaries. There were 3 things that we talked about at the last meeting needed to happen. One is renumbering the districts, and given that you have approved the Benning Tech Park as TAD number 1, as I said, we've renumbered these so that Liberty District would be TAD number 2, Uptown would be TAD number 3, and City Village TAD number 4. There was a request to make those boundary changes, and we have made those changes. And then the third issue was how should the city, or how could the city deal with the potential impact of the reassessment process that you're going through currently. Over the last month, we spent quite a bit of time consulting with other cities and talking to one of the state's foremost authorities on the redevelopment power law, Ms. Sharon Gay, who's with Denton's, about how would be the most efficient way to deal with the potential change in value that would come from the reassessment sometime, say, mid-2017, 2017, if you made the decision to go ahead and adopt the TAD this year, which would then set the base at 2016. And the conclusion was there's a provision in the law called a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes provision, but the language is not totally clear that the sponsoring jurisdiction can give itself its own pilot. It clearly can be one that you can do with a school district, or if you, in this case, if you're a municipality, you could do it with a county. But it's not clear that the sponsoring jurisdiction can actually create a pilot to itself. So looking at the language, the conclusion was that the best strategy was to use the amendment provision that's in the law. In section 4436 10B has a provision that basically allows you to add parcels at a future time. So you could potentially add a couple small parcels. And what that does is it triggers that you then have to reset the base to the year that you had those parcels. So how that would work is if we went through the reassessment process, when you have the answer, let's say in the middle of 2017, and there was a significant difference in your opinion, council's opinion, between 2016 and 2017 values, what you could do is amend those districts, add a couple small parcels, and that would set the base to that 2017 number. That looks to be the cleanest and simplest approach, and it gives you total option to do it or not do it, depending on the results of the assessment process. So you have this tool. You can use it at any time once those assessments are done. And if it's in your opinion the difference is immaterial, you don't have to do it. But if you came back and said, wow, it's significant, it's a couple percent, then you just do the amendment process. And that seems to be the cleanest, simplest way to deal with that process. So our recommendation would be to proceed and adopt the plan this year, set the base in 2016. That will allow you to start marketing the properties to attract projects into the 3 TAD areas, and you can move ahead, and then if it becomes necessary to make that adjustment, we don't anticipate there will be any debt that would be issued in that previous 12 months, and that would mean that you could reset the base and make that adjustment based on what your final conclusions are about the assessment process in 2017. The other thing I would point out, as I mentioned, by including this portion of the River Landing project in, now including taking it out of the TAD and leaving it in the city's tax base, we think that will generate several $100,000 in the short term to the city in 2017 and 18, which would hopefully help offset, again, some of the impacts of that reassessment process. It may not cover it all, but at least it would be a step in the right direction to make sure you were covered in terms of some of those additional revenues. And so with that, we would be glad to answer any questions you have about the amended redevelopment plan or anything else about the 3 TADs.
All right, we have the Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Bleakly, earlier we talked about ownership disclosures by an elected person on the council. Does that apply to the school board and any other elected body?
It is and I am not an attorney, but it's my understanding from talking to Sharon Gay about this, that the current law, the way it's worded, says boards and authorities. So I would think potentially it would include them. But it's very vague. The language is in the statute it's not totally clear.
And let me follow up on that. Mayor Pro Tem, that's the way we read it because the statute is written so broadly, and the school board attorney has looked at it, and I believe he reads it the same way, that it would cover the school board. And through Ms. Gay, the lawyer in Atlanta, and others, we're trying to get that state law addressed, get the General Assembly to take another look at it, because it is so broad that it prohibits, participation by board members and employees in a district where they might want to live, potentially. And let me make one other correction, Mayor, on Councilor Huff's question, just so we're all clear. If he's owned property more than 2 years in any of the districts, he can participate and he can vote on that particular district. But if you have bought it within the last 2 years, you could not. So I just wanted to clarify that. All right.
That law does not affect state elected officials, only
No.
local.
The law does not prohibit state elected officials or federal officials from buying property in the district. It's only aimed at local council members and school boards right now, but we hope the General Assembly will take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have Councilor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, just so I understand, I guess what we're asked to do, since some of us, I think, have some serious concerns about and it's not the amount of money. I just want to be clear, and I've spoken with Mr. Bishop about this. The idea that there's this huge difference that's going to be uncovered when we set the baseline, then look at it a year later, I don't think that's going to happen. For me, it's the principle of this is not my money. This money belongs to the taxpayers who are living in that district, and it actually, in terms of what it can mean in terms of fulfilling our operational obligations, it belongs to the entire community. So for me, it's more about getting an accurate baseline, at least that's my perspective. So what I understand is we're going to adopt a district that we know going in, we're going to change. And then you say in 2017?
Yeah, it's our understanding that the
It would be
reassessment
done on the-
process would be completed in 2017.
By the first, yeah. I think you're right. So in 2017, what we would do is, I assume we would withhold the funding of any projects till then in those particular areas, move a boundary line, cull a piece of property, and then it would reset everything
To that value.
for a calculation to draw a new baseline based on the assessed value as of 2017.
That would be your option.
And the reason I stated that is because I want to make sure I understand it, because I'm okay with that. And I don't really have a problem approving any of these TADs, because all we're doing is we're setting our easel, so to speak. What we draw on it is entirely up to us.
Correct.
And to that point, I would encourage anybody that's got a project in their back pocket that they're looking to pursue. I hearken back to what happened with BRAC. We were expecting 37,000 people, and people started building like crazy. Don't get your cart in front of our horse, because we want to make sure that the projects that are presented are projects that are amenable, that we all agree on. And I still struggle, frankly, with this economic development tool in some areas that are already experiencing pretty solid redevelopment. So I just wanted to make sure I understood it. I'm not going to have any problem supporting the TAD districts themselves.
All right, let's see, we have Counselor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One, if you could help me, I think you stated that at some point we could add properties into the TAD.
Yes,
Would we also be able to exclude properties that are already in the TAD?
yes. You can change the boundary.
So it could be massaged either way. Okay, Mayor, my other question is regarding Councilor Davis' statement. In past requests that councilors have made expressing a concern about voting on an issue, council has voted to allow them to abstain. Is that what we need to do based
Well,
on his request?
It is, I believe, in our charter that if a counselor requests to abstain, that it must be voted on by council. I don't know if the state law preempts that by forbidding it. I'd have to ask the city attorney. When state
Yeah,
law
I mean-
forbids the participation, do you have to
Yeah,
vote on it?
he's made a disclosure, so he is forbidden by statute from participating in the Uptown TAD district.
Would it hurt anything if we simply voted to make certain that no one can make a contention that Counselor Davis
If you
didn't
wanna-
perfect the record?
you-
Might as
You
well.
could do that probably in March would be a
Okay.
better time to do it, when all this is on the table.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're all on.
I agree.
Safe
Might as
ground.
well just make sure we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's. Let's just make a note, Mr. City Attorney and Madam Clerk, that when this comes back up in March, that we'll follow that procedure and remind everyone of Counselor Davis's statement, and then I have a motion and vote to abstain. Let's see, we have Counselor Henderson.
I'm sorry, I had one other quick question. Is there any other authority that we have to, that has to agree with our interpretation of a significant difference in order to affect these changes?
No,
It's
that's
solely
totally
at
your
our
discretion. That's
So it
correct.
can't be challenged. Nobody can come back later and say, it's only $500. We're not going to allow you to do it.
There's no set amount.
Okay.
You will determine that amount. It's not spelled out in any law or limitation.
I appreciate it.
All right, we have Counselor Baker.
Thank you. Just briefly, and I believe this goes to policies and guidelines, and I thought this was in here, but I did not see it. But my question is, once a parcel goes into a project, goes into the TAD, if there's a project big enough that the developer thought that his business model was a better fit for a tax abatement than a TAD, then, it's not in here that he has forfeited that. Because once we put these parcels in the TADs, you couldn't give a tax abatement because you need that tax revenue to pay the financing. So is that a policy and guideline issue
It's a
that just should be
policy.
added?
it's really a policy question for you. Legally, you could do it, you wouldn't practically. You either do one or the other. There are examples where they have had within TADs, the companies taking the abatement instead of the TAD. And kind of the argument is if the district's already growing, then that doesn't really harm, it doesn't create a deficit. But the rule generally is if you're in the TAD, that's the preferred methodology, so.
And I would agree, and I would like, maybe if Mr. Jones could look at that, Mr. City Attorney, and possibly update or just bring us some information about updating our policies. It just doesn't make, from a business standpoint, to allow somebody to opt out for a tax abatement when you're going to depend on those tax dollars to make the bond payments. So, it could put you in a bad spot, so. If Mr. Jones could look at that from a policy standpoint before we go too far past March. And then my last question is on the bond repayments. Is it, I know every 6 months, I assume you make the interest payments. Is it a sinking fund type where you reserve the principal and pay it off at the end, or is it amortized down
Amortized usually.
Each semi-annual payment amortizes the debt down? Okay.
Yes.
No, just curious. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on this public hearing here? And this is for all 3 districts. Councilor Davis.
Madam Mayor, this pertains to the Liberty District. I'm somewhat disappointed. We talked about making changes. There were some concerns of the council about the South Commons area, and I don't see any changes that have been made there. The way I understand it, council can amend the TAD with a motion and the right amount of votes to remove that area. And I believe it could be done tonight, or it could be done when the resolution comes forward. Well, and I have to, I'm going to say this, I've said it before, I will not support the Liberty District. I'm all in agreement with it, but I'm not in agreement with the South Commons area being part of it. And the reason being behind that, whether it's current, whether it's potential, whether it's future city interest, I think that it would be a conflict to keep it in the TAD at this point.
Councilor Davis, would that include the fuel station? Because that's not
No,
South
ma'am,
Commons.
it's South Commons City.
And it's a potential
Only
gray field
city
or brownfield?
land, only city land. I think it's very clear. I've had numerous conversations with several entities in this room, several people in this room.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's well understood what I mean by this and my concerns, so there shouldn't be any question.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because in case that ever was a brownfield or gray field, I think people would just need to know, but I don't believe that's South Commons, so
No.
maybe we can just chat later to make sure we all
It would,
understand.
I think it would be the softball field, the Civic Center,
Right.
and Golden Park area.
Okay. Was that a motion?
I
or
will make a motion.
Okay. Would you make it again, Councilor Davis, just so we know, since it's redrawing of lines?
It would be the area known as South Commons, which would be as we know today, the softball fields, the main softball field, the Civic Center, and Golden Park. And that would include the skateboard park as well.
All right, that's a motion, and Councilor Barnes is a second. Well, you'd have to make a motion for him to be heard. Well, I guess it's a public
And
hearing.
Madam Mayor, I believe those parcels are outlined on the tax maps, on the tax
Okay.
rolls.
All right, we have several counselors in queue. Indicate if you wanted to speak about, because you were in queue for a while, that you wanted to speak to this particular motion. Councilor Thomas does, and I think that there's someone on public hearing that would like to hear as well. Councilor Thomas.
I just want to be very clear exactly which properties we're talking about and exactly where those lines are. I know generally what Councilor Davis has outlined, but I just want to make sure that we've got them. And it may be that tonight may not be the time to do that. It may be, again, that when we actually vote on this in March, that those be drawn. I'm assuming that basically what he's talking about are the softball fields does it go all the way to Victory Drive? The softball fields all the way to the river? I mean, this is a little more in-depth than some of the things that we deal with, and I want to be sure that I know the property that he's talking about. I personally do not have a problem with voting to exclude generally what he's talking about, but I want to know exactly and specifically.
Okay. Let's see. Anyone else to this motion? Counselor Henderson, then Counselor Woodson.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, a couple of questions. One, I don't have a problem voting it out, but I'm kind of a visual guy, so I wonder if it would make better sense to draw the boundaries and bring it back for a vote when we can put it up on the screen and show the public what we're talking about carving out. And another question too, sort of aside from that, is I guess the same options apply, so that if there were ever a need to adjust that, if we wanted to move that boundary, we could do that and it would reset that area as well?
The only challenge, like in 2017, absolutely. When you get a couple more years into it, if you've issued debt, then you basically have to have provisions to pay for that debt, or you can't amend the
So that
boundary.
brings up another good question. Is there
I mean, technically, you can't.
there's a window of opportunity, and it's not dictated by time, it's dictated by whether or not you've
When
initiated
you go-
projects and issued debt.
Yeah, and how much of the debt the district consumes. In other words, if you're issuing a small amount, you'll still
No, I-
have plenty of reserve, it's not an issue.
Yeah, I get
But if
that.
you're issuing a big amount,
So if we've
people aren't gonna
authorized
want
the
you to move
project,
the
the debt's
boundary.
been issued, then that window shuts.
Kind of closed
Okay.
down, yeah.
Okay. Let's see, we have Counselor Woodson to
Yes.
speak to the motion.
It's to the motion. I too would like to see it, just to, instead of imagine it. And then I would like a little bit more explanation on why were the other parcels added, because through all our conversation, and when Councilor Glenn brought this Davis, his concern was Golden Park, because of the fact that the possibility Georgia can give us a casino, or probably because there's someone interested in buying the property. So I knew that was the reason why we wanted to take that out. But why are we taking out South Common and the Civic Center if that doesn't generate taxes anyway? And if I understood you correctly, if it's not in the district, okay, and something goes wrong, let's say the sidewalk, something happens to the sidewalk, then the funding from the TAD would not cover it because it's not in the TAD. And we would have to find that funding to fix that piece of property later. Is that correct?
You can only spend the TAD money inside the boundary of the TAD. You can't spend money generated in the TAD outside the boundary.
Okay. And see, and I understood the thought behind Golden Park, but I guess I'm not ready to vote because I like to see it there, and I like to know the thought behind the Civic Center and the South Common area where the 8 softball fields are, because I don't see any development there, but I can see them benefiting from any funding coming there to repair the South Common fields. So I don't, and it's too quick to say. I have to get some answers, but I don't see the benefit of removing the Civic Center nor the South Common area. The Golden Park, I'm not too excited, but it's acceptable because we could still go back and redraw the lines. But I'm having some concerns of other property that belongs to us that can benefit from it because we're not going to sell that property. It belongs to the public. So, Mayor, I'm not ready to vote
Okay.
until
Well,
I
we
can
can, we've
see
got some
it.
more
So,
discussion, we can always entertain.
Okay.
I don't, Counselor Davis is in line, he may or may not want to withdraw it. If he wants to leave it on the table, somebody could offer a substitute motion, but this time, we still have counselors in queue. Counselor Barnes?
No,
Okay. Counselor Davis?